Hello Niners, we're back here for another Visual Studio 2010 .NET Framework 4-week video, again with Karen. Hello Karen. I'm sure they know you already, but how about you introduce yourself again and talk about what we're going to be showing in this video.
Sure. Hi, my name is Karen Liu, and I did a video early this week if you caught that. Thanks, Jason. I'm the lead program manager for the Visual C# and the Visual Basic IDEs. So what we're going to spend some time talking about today is about test-driven development, and how we're making some improvements in Visual Studio to help you with a test-first style development. And what I mean by that is, traditionally if you've been using Visual Studio, which I'm sure you guys all are, we've been really great in terms of the IDE with understanding your code if you already have your classes, the properties, the method, but essentially your API already built up. So imagine if you first started writing a class and you were told to create a purchasing system that would submit an order. The first thing you might do is just create that order class with all the properties and methods you might need. If you happen to program in a different kind of style, which we find a lot with the test-first development, your API doesn't yet exist. And the IDE tends to fight you when you're doing that. So let me show you some of the improvements that we're doing to help you flow in that kind of way if you happen to program in a test-first style.
Cool.
So let's just jump in quickly, and what I have here is you'll just see kind of a normal website. The application we're going to work on today is an MVC app, and I've chosen the ASP.NET MVC application. Probably some of you know, because testability is built so deeply into MVC, I can write a unit test against a controller without having to spin up a whole IIS server, but test that that controller actually exists. So in this app I have here, this is pretty much the default template you get when you install MVC. I have a home tab that just tells me my home. I have an About Us tab that just describes pretty empty About Us. And I have a Login tab. So when I click on this, first thing you'll notice is my login controller doesn't actually exist. So what I want to do today in this kind of quick demo is to implement that login controller. But I want to implement that login controller using a test-first style. So again, all I have here is I have one project, which is my MVC app, and I have another project that is my test app. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to create that login controller test and show you the kinds of things that we're doing in Visual Studio to help you kind of build up code in this way. So the first thing I'll do is just add a new test. Let me go ahead and add a unit test. And I'll call this my login controller test. So this is the kind of the pre-default we generate for you. One thing we are moving towards is what you'll see in Visual Studio 10, not yet in the CTP, but you'll see our test templates become a lot more basic, a lot simpler, a lot more condensed in the kind of information we give you. So it really is that quick and dirty, give me that test and let me start writing code. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete my code and show you what happens when I'm building up different pieces I need. So the first thing I'll do is I want to add a test class. And what I have here is a test class code snippet that you've seen in 2005 probably. Hopefully you use it. It'll come up in the list. And this is a snippet that I've created myself. I'm going to hit tab to just invoke that snippet. And let me first create this class. So this class, I just want it to be my login controller. Test here. I'll hit enter. The next thing you'll see here is, the squiggle will tell me. So as a key point, as you're kind of working with Visual Studio in Dev 10, anytime you see these squiggles in C#, it's really giving you this design time error that you would have had to build before, but now you can get it right in line code. Anytime you see a smart tag, hit Control Dot on it. Put your cursor on it and hit Control Dot. Control Dot is the way you invoke the smart tag, and we're bringing in a number of things that will help you fix up your code. So the first thing I'll see here is I can go ahead and just add a using to unit testing, my unit testing tools. Next thing I'll do is just add my test method. Again, my code snippet. Go ahead and hit tab to expand that. And now the test I want to create here is I want to verify that my login controller exists. So verify my login test login controller exists. Okay. The next thing I'll do here is I want to just go ahead and invoke an instance of that controller. And remember, I'm doing test first. You saw that controller didn't exist. So I'll just go ahead and type login controller. At this point, some of you might be aware that if I hit space, it's going to complete on the wrong thing. One thing that you'll see us doing as well is we are revamping IntelliSense and introducing a new style that allows you to really do this consume first development. You'll be able to explicitly toggle between the kinds of modes you're programming in to tell IntelliSense when not to get in your way, but still give you information, but then also keep the same way you had before. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and hit login controller. I'll hit escape right there. I'll call this controller. I'm going to call this, just create an instance of it again. And as I hit the end of the line, you'll again see those lines telling me my login controller isn't bound. I'm going to hit control dot just at the end of the line, and it'll give me two options. The first one is to generate a new class for login controller, and that's if I want to just generate that class. I don't really care where it's placed. I want it in my project. I'll worry about moving it later. Or I can go ahead and choose generate other, which gives me a richer set of options I have if I want to generate this class. Let me generate this. You'll notice that because you're probably going to put your test in your test project and your code in another one. If I go ahead and just click on my code project, it changes accessibility for me. I can go ahead and add that new file. Immediately, the using directive was added for me, the reference was added for me, and I'm now colorized as a type. So one thing we're trying to do in Visual Studio 2010 is make it easy for you to write the code you want to. So I just want to think about the test and have the IDE be laying down the train tracks and building up the code you need around you. The next thing I'll do is just hit new result. So this is part of the MVC. Control dot again. Let me go ahead and add using systemweb.mvc. I'll call this result. I'll go ahead and say I want this to be actually my controller, and I want it to return whatever is returned when I call that login method. So you'll see it doesn't exist in the list, but I'll just go ahead and write it. And at the end, I'll get the same thing. So I'll hit control dot again. I get this option to generate a method stub in my login controller. I'll go ahead and click that. The last thing I want to do for this test is I just want to verify that the two things are equal. So I expect to return a page called login page. And I'm going to take that from my results. And I want this to be view data. I want to call this title. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and run this test. So I can right-click and run all tests here. Just go ahead and click on that. So that it immediately succeeds and my test fails. So the important point you saw there is typically when you're writing that test, you would have probably gone back and created that login controller class. You don't have to do that anymore. What's happening in the background, if I go ahead and jump into this, is we're actually creating that login controller for you. So let me actually show you another thing we're doing. So one of the biggest complaints we've heard is, why doesn't this take me to my test failure? I'm just going to go ahead and double click. It's going to take me right there. And now I can just go ahead and implement what I need to. So let's do login impl. I'll use a code snippet there to just create my view data and return that single view. And again, what I want this to do is I want this to inherit from controller because it's an MVC controller. And I'll hit control dot again and let the IDE fix that for me to add the using. So now let me go ahead and run my tests again. So one thing we introduced in 2008 is a quick way, a key binding way to allow you to run all of my tests. So let me just click control RT to just run all the tests in my context. So you can see that I easily am able to run all my tests and I can verify that my login controller exists. So at this point I'm going to jump really quickly to another project here. And I want to take us, so imagine, I'm kind of showing you a different project here because it installs on this one, but another thing that we're doing in terms of kind of your test-driven development support in Visual Studio is we've opened up the extensibility that you can do in MS Test. So what that means, and this is kind of the same project I have here, when I ran all my tests, you'll notice one key test here, which is we've opened up extensibility to allow you to plug in any other kind of third-party test framework inside the VS Test Runner. So what I have is, you'll notice this icon here isn't the same icon as the other ones. What this is actually the Galileo icon. And what this is an NV Unit version 3 test. And if I go ahead and see, I actually have a test project. So imagine if I already have all of these existing tests that I have, I can just go ahead and wrap that in a VS project template type, an MB unit test, and it's automatically pulled into the MS test runner when you're running your test. So again, if I look at this test, I'm using test fixtures, and I'm also using the MB unit framework class. So this is another thing that we're doing in terms of supporting TDD, that we want you to use the third-party tools that you use. We want you to easily be able to write MS tests, mix them with tests you already have if they exist in your company. So I'll jump quickly back here. So if you remember my context, what I was trying to do was create a login controller. I've written a single test that just verifies that login controller exists. So I'm going to use a quick navigation tool. Another problem we've heard in TDD is, how do I get back and forth between my test and my implementation? We have a new feature called Quick Search, so I'm going to hit Control, comma. This allows me just to find my login test. So if I remember that it was a test, I remember it had login in it, we'll treat a set of wildcards and just kind of get to that file. So it's a quick way that I can go back. So let me add one more test method. So what I've done so far is I've created a test method that verifies that my controller exists. I'm going to create another test method to verify that that login controller does something. So I'll just call this form submit test. And I'll use my snippet here again to just spit out the code of verifying that that form actually exists, or something happens when I click on that login controller. Here I'm going to use create an instance of my login controller. I'll use a C# 3.0 language feature called object initializers to create an instance of that controller and then initialize the two properties on it. I'll hit control dot. This gives me the option to generate my property stub. For name, do the same thing here, generate that property stub. Another error allows me to know that I can just go ahead and control dot, generate that method stub. And now what I can do is again run that test. The test itself fails. Sorry. The test itself fails here instead, and I can go ahead and implement that form submit method. So let me just go ahead and again use my snippet. I don't do any authentication, so don't do any of my good practices here. I'm just showing you the features. I'll go ahead and generate a form. So at this point, what I've shown you kind of quickly, so hopefully rewatch the video if I talk too quickly. I've shown you generating two tests, one for my login controller and one to verify that form submit works. And so at this point, because I'm working in MVC, which means these unit tests are running against my controller, even though I've never spun up that website, I'm going to trust that it works. So let me go ahead and run my website here. I'll bring up that same really basic ASP.NET MVC app here. Click on my login controller. Login controller exists there. I go ahead and verify this with my password. See, immediately I get that working. So that was a little bit of a whirlwind tour of what we're doing in TDD, but we're hoping to kind of improve the experience as you're writing code through it. What you won't see in the CGP as well is you won't see refactorings yet, but keep your eye open for a couple new features that are coming as well.
Very cool. Thanks for your time, Karen. And until next time, there's been another Visual Studio 2010 and .NET Framework 4-week video.